Hey guys, it's Mr. Anderson here. I'm going to be reading Profiled by Daniel Haile-Michael. It was November 2005. We were playing basketball at our local court at the housing estate in Flemington. Most people were out and about. They had broken their Ramadan fast. We were just spending time around the neighbourhood playing ball. I was with three people and one of the guys wanted to grab a cigarette. We walked from the housing estates out onto the main street where the petrol station was. The petrol station was about 100 metres from the local high school. It just happened to be muck-up day. After we got the cigarettes, we continued walking up the main road, almost past the high school. We saw what looked like security guards at the entrance to the school, so we thought, let's go back onto the estates. We started going back down to the estates, but by the time we got to the petrol station, a divvy van pulled up and swerved in front of us. Two cops got out. They said, "What are you bloody idiots doing in the school?" They alleged that we had been inside the grounds throwing rocks or something like that. We told them we had nothing to do with whatever they were talking about. They didn't believe us. It escalated quickly. It just started really going off. They began to physically assault us, punching and kicking. I was scared for my life. It was hard to comprehend what was happening at the time. I never thought someone who was supposed to protect you would assault and batter you. I was 15, not doing anything wrong, and being assaulted by police officers. My biggest fear was what they were going to do next. I thought, if they're going to do this in public, once they arrest me, what's going to happen then? If I don't get away from these cops right now, I'm in trouble. That was the scariest thing. That was what was running through my mind. When the officers hit me, I yelled and screamed to see if people would come to help, come and assist us. No one was around. After the assault, it got real for me. A lot of my friends had been complaining about police harassment, but I sort of just thought they were in the wrong place or they were doing the wrong thing and it was no big deal. Or maybe they were just exaggerating like young guys do. Then it happened to me and it was very real. I became a lot more fearful of police and law enforcement in general. I felt uncomfortable. I stopped walking places. When I did walk somewhere, I tried to avoid going alone. I went with friends. I tried to avoid situations where I might be alone with law enforcement. I can't remember where I was living at the time, but I think I started taking a different route to school as well. I avoided main roads, always take the back way became my motto. I didn't tell my family. They wouldn't have believed me. They might have suspected that I actually did something wrong. They always took the side of the system. They were very grateful for having moved to Australia. Given their refugee background, they think everything is perfect here. It's very hard for them to imagine that something like this could happen. Australia is supposed to be an ideal country. Sometimes they say just toughen up, like this is nothing compared to what might go on in other places. We used to go to this youth drop-in centre in North Melbourne. I was known as the good boy, the nerd of the whole neighbourhood. And when that happened to me, everyone at the centre started talking about it. They told the youth workers. Then on one of one of the drop-in nights, the workers stopped all the activities and said we needed to create a youth leadership group to try to deal with some of these issues that were happening in the neighbourhood. People put their hands up to join. From that night, we teamed up with the council on a voluntary basis to try and come up with a few initiatives that could solve some of the issues affecting our community: unemployment, discrimination, poverty. We developed a relationship with the local legal centre to work on the issue of law enforcement. The five of us who had been harassed by police officers launched a court case against Victoria Police. It was to do with racial profiling. The case lasted from 2005 to 2013, 8 years. The way the justice system is set up, these processes are so arduous and long. We didn't go to court straight off. There was a lot of negotiation, a lot of going through different bodies first. Sometimes frustrating to deal with this because I just wanted to move on and try to live a normal life. But in many ways I couldn't because there was always this unresolved thing there. I always reflected on that one time I was so vulnerable and so scared. There was trauma. I was in a constant, almost continuous state of fear. In some ways, I was on a military mission. Every day, you just want to get through it, survive. Other times I'd have to sacrifice my time and my money and my energy just trying to deal with the case and the issue of racial profiling more broadly. Attending community meetings and doing all that kind of activism stuff at such a young age, it was tough. I constantly felt conflicted being between doing what was important and what was right for me and doing what was right for the community. It felt like I had to put my life on pause to follow this thing that needed to be done. People pulled out during those 8 years. Some felt it was too taxing. They didn't see a benefit for them and their communities in the short term. When the burden became too much, they gave up. For Victoria Police, the case was important because it was about improving their systems and their processes. For the lawyers, well, that is their careers. But for us, as the individuals in the case, we were being asked to put our lives on hold for no individual gain. For some, that was a high price to pay, especially given the situation we were in. It's not as if we were middle class, and had a house and had these basic things you need to survive as a human. We were vulnerable. We had grown up in housing commission, first generation refugees who were trying to establish a life and a new home. It was a big thing that was being asked of us in that context. For me, the personal toll entailed not having the space and time and energy to excel in my studies and to get myself out of poverty quickly. Those years I spent volunteering and helping the community out and being expected to take on leadership roles, all the advocacy work, that was unpaid for many years, at a time when I was supposed to be establishing my life and trying to get to do things like purchase a home, get a stable job, start a career. I don't regret it, but I sort of turned between those two worlds. I was doing a civil engineering degree and all this community work on the side. It's hard to really excel in anything in that situation. I compromised on both. In 2013, the police settled the case with us. In some ways, I felt relief at the settlement, but there was also a bit of regret because I really wanted to see the police officer get on the stand and to explain why they did what they did. The officers had actually retired, so that was not going to happen. I knew that, but I felt like it should have happened. I wanted to see them in court, having to explain their actions to a judge. On the other hand, we had people drop out from our case, and it had been so many years since those incidents. So if we were called to the stand, our memories wouldn't have been as clear as they would have been. There were all these other factors that blurred our chances of success were we to go on to trial. I think in the end, what the case did for Victoria and what it's done for Australia is really progress the discussion on issues of police discrimination and racial profiling. If you look at it at a systemic level, the case became a pivotal point. It sort of pushed the state to really try to address some of these issues. To that end, I think it was a good result. In 2015, 2 years after the settlement, my co-defendant, Maki Isa, and I released a report. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It looks at police treatment of 10 men of African and refugee backgrounds in the Flemington, Sunshine, Noble Park, and Dandenong. The report made clear that while Victoria Police had made changes to address racial profiling, new patterns of behaviour were not occurring across the organisation. The Herald Sun reported correctly that we were shocked by the extent that police inflicted serious assault, harassment, and public ridicule on young African men, as well as by how widely accepted the practices were within their communities. Releasing that report felt good. I mean, in the sense that I sort of felt vindicated. At least I did something for society. When you risk so much to change something, when you see some progress, you sort of feel like, yeah, this is worth it. That in itself is a huge reward. In terms of racial profiling of African Australians now, in some ways we are we are back where we were 10 years ago or more. But I think a lot of things have changed too. 10 years ago, I might not have had politicians standing up against the kind of police profiling that happened to me, whereas now at least there is a certain section of society who have a better understanding of what racial profiling is and who aren't afraid to call it out. I feel like within the leadership of Victoria Police 10 years ago, they would have just supported one another. In February 2018, the Assistant Commissioner was found to have sent racist messages outside of work time using a pseudonym, and he resigned. I don't think that would have happened 10 years ago. It would have just been in the media for a little bit with no other consequences. Whereas now you've got the leadership team who's, if we're looking at it from the outside, actually saying that these sort of things aren't on, that you can't make those racist comments. I think there's less room now for intolerance than there was 10 years ago. Given where I am today, what happened to me sometimes doesn't seem like such a big deal anymore. But if I wasn't as resilient as I was, and if I didn't have the right support people around me, and if I couldn't move out of that neighborhood, if I was locked there, I could have easily seen myself going down a road where I'd constantly be in contact with the justice system. I'd have a life that was trapped in cycles of fear and be in and out of jail. Thank goodness I got out of that place. The fact that I am where I am, I feel okay. But if things hadn't lined up for me, I think that would have completely destroyed my life. For a lot of my peers, that's been the case. A lot of them are just in and out of jail now. That sort of police profiling really criminalised a lot of my friends. It's very hard. You wish you had the resources to assist to get them out of that environment, to get them away from the situation, because you know what it's like and you're kind of helpless. I'm 28 now and the case is 6 years behind me. I feel like I've progressed beyond it. I feel like I've done my bit and I've seen other people who have been inspired by that work and made advocacy a career for themselves. In the local African community, we have social workers, we have lawyers. It feels like there are enough people now and there's a real movement that's being built against police harassment. I feel like there is hope. Thanks for listening.